I do welcome you today to this church, which was Ethel's church, is Ethel's church. She's had quite a few over the years, although they've all been in this town. And there is no better place, really, for her and I hope for us to come together. Because here and wherever we come to worship God is where the God of heaven often speaks to us. A place where the God of earth often comforts us. A place where many times in the past the pain of grief has been gently soothed. Where hurting hearts have been healed and people made whole again. Where restless thoughts and anxious imaginings have been calmed and stilled away. For here, and in many other places too, is where God's people meet, coming together in community to dry each other's tears, to support those who are unhappy, to mend as best we can the hurt and brokenness of those who experience the keenest and the strongest sense of loss. Here is where hope and strength can be found, in the sincerity of a handshake, in the warmth of a hug, in the simplicity of a smile, in the silence of a shared understanding that needs no words. And all that speaks loudly of the love and all-embracing compassion that comes to earth from heaven itself. So here is the right place, I believe, for us today. And it was for Ethel, and for those who are closest to her, who loved her the most. And so, to use some verses of Psalm 147, open your mouths with thanks. Strum the harp in unending praise to our God, who blankets the heavens with clouds, sends rain to water the thirsty earth, and pulls up each blade of grass upon the mountainside. God opens his hand to feed all the animals, and scatters seed to nestlings when they cry. The Eternal One takes pleasure in those who worship him, those who invest hope in his unfailing love. And we have a hymn that speaks of God's unfailing love, love divine, all loves excelling. We come to God in prayer. Let us pray. Loving God, you have made us in your image to love and to be loved. You gave us eyes to see those who are in need. You gave us ears to hear those whose voices or cries need to be heard. You gave us voices and speech to offer our words of comfort or challenge. You gave us touch to bring, without word, warmth and understanding to those who live in fear or doubt or confusion or sorrow. Loving God, as we come to you, we think of how Ethel used all of her senses, some which worked better than others, to worship you, to praise you, to care and welcome us and so many others. And we thank you for her and for the example that she gave us. For she mirrored your love as we seek to do. We pray in the name of Jesus Christ. And we join in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. You will see from your order of service that we have 2 tributes which come from the family. But I am going to invite you after that, if any of you would like to just come forward and say a few words about anything that you valued about Ethel or that you remember, then you could be thinking of that now. Just a few words, but there will be that opportunity if you wish to share that with all of us. But first, we hear from Andrew.
Some childhood memories of Mum and growing up with Mum. Mum was brought up in Boxmoor, and with her parents she attended the Primitive Methodist Chapel. She married Charles and had 2 children, Alison and myself. Interestingly, Alison and our cousin Paul were the last babies to be christened in the old Primitive Methodist Chapel, and I was the first to be christened in the then brand new Bourne Methodist Church. So a bit of history with this building. When I was 2 years old, we moved to a new build council house in Highfield where we grew up and attended Marlowe's Methodist Church. Not having a car, we walked almost everywhere, and if it was too far to walk, we would get a bus. We often walked over to Boxmoor to visit our grandparents in Anchor Lane, other relatives for family events, and the church. Our walk home would take us along a dark footpath next to the Heath Lane Cemetery, and it was always really creepy, and I was always pleased to get past this point. Before having her family, Mum was a seamstress and worked at the needle factory in Marlowe's, where the college is now. She was an accomplished dressmaker and often made garments for us to wear. I particularly remember her making a suit that I wore when I first started work. She was also a knitter. Over the years, we had many jumpers, or pullovers as they were known. One that sticks in my mind was a brown and yellow striped sleeveless jumper. I think it made me like a bumblebee. And in the PowerPoint earlier that we saw, there was some of the grandchildren wearing jumpers, which was great. Mum was very involved in many elements of the church and lived out her faith in service of others. She was a member of a choir for many years, until it wasn't possible due to her hearing loss. She taught in the Sunday school and was an active member of the ladies' groups, often leading and organising events. She would also lead Bible discussions at these meetings. In addition to this, she was the mission secretary, and part of this required organising the certificates and medals for the youngsters in recognition for the money that they collected for mission work. At least once a year, we would travel up to London on the train to go to the Methodist Mission House in Marylebone Road, and we collect the medals and certificates. And again, this would involve lots of walking. Mum spent many hours in the kitchen, both at home and at church, and she made the best suet puddings. Mum was always in the church kitchen, helping with the catering at Marlowe's and at circuit events. The harvest suppers at Marlowe's were fabulous events, if anybody remembers them. And I think we had gammon, mashed potatoes and peas, and it always tasted and smelt so good. It was always seemed to be the same ladies in the kitchen at the circuit events, making the tea and preparing the sandwiches and cakes, and Mum would always be there doing her bit. It looked like they always had lots of fun and made good friendships. One particular highlight was going to the annual missionary garden party at a house in Buncefield Lane. I think it was the Newcombs. And they always seem to have a cow with a calf, so there's lots of fresh milk and amazing cream to go with the strawberries. Again, Mum would be in the kitchen with the other ladies, making sure everyone was suitably refreshed. Summer holidays were usually a week away in a caravan. We often had fish and chips on the last night. I can still remember going up a long flight of stairs at the fish restaurant in Walton-the-Naze. I think it was called the Copper Kettle, but it might not be, because I Googled it and couldn't find it. And after the fish and chips, I would also have a Knickerbocker Glory, and we would laugh at the name because it always sounded a bit naughty to me. Other summer days were spent in Gabridge Park, paddling in the river and catching the small fish in our nets. Sure, the river was much deeper in those days. An occasional treat was getting on the bus and heading off to St Albans for a walk around the Abbey and a picnic in the park. St Albans always felt so far away. And growing up, we all had bikes, and we used to go on family bike rides. I remember cycling over to Redbourne. This was before the Nicky line was converted, so it was out through Grove Hill and down the lanes. I think we cycled to the zoo at least once, which was much better than getting the bus, because with the bus, we got off the bus, we had to walk a mile before we even got to the zoo. So, I love long walks and cycling in the countryside, and I'm sure it comes from all the walking and cycling we did when I was growing up. And these memories of Mum will always stay with me forever. Great memories. Thank you.
Richard is going to bring his tribute that comes from Alison and him and this side of the family.
Hello, it's good to be here. Obviously, other circumstances would be better, but it's good to celebrate Ethel's life. As we looked through Ethel's belongings, Mum's belongings, Alison found a small painted cross, which I think sat beside her in her room on the windowsill for some time, didn't it? And if you visited her, you probably would have seen that little painted wooden cross. And the card that came with the cross had these words on it from Deuteronomy 31:8. The Lord himself goes before you and will be with you. He will never leave you nor forsake you. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Maybe from Alison's point of view and our point of view as a family, Ethel's faith seems like a good place to begin. And just to focus on for a moment, in some senses I'm expanding a bit on what Andrew has already said. Ethel's father was a Methodist local preacher in the primitive church tradition, also a church steward, and later a Sunday school teacher in the Boxmoor Chapel. And Ethel, no doubt, was influenced by his strong faith, probably quite a sort of a strict faith and maybe a strict background. Tony Shepherd recalls Ethel and Dorothy Cope teaching in the Sunday school. So Tony Shepherd was obviously quite young at that stage. So this is the chapel in Boxmoor. And he was obviously influenced by that. I remember Tony as a youth club leader. Some of you will remember him as the same too. But Ethel went on to share in the work of the Boxmoor Baptist Church as well, where she was a member of the Girls' Life Brigade. And eventually, as you said, her membership travelled from Boxmoor Chapel to Bourne and then to Marlows. Much later, when she was unable to attend church in person and her mobility limitations prevented that from happening, she continued to worship at home, and she enjoyed the HHMC worship resources that were printed for her every week. She was always a bit frustrated when the post meant they didn't turn up until maybe Monday or Tuesday, and she couldn't share in the occasion on the Sunday when she knew everybody was worshipping together. And she was even more annoyed if the BBC changed the times of songs of praise due to sport or something of that sort. It was Ethel's faith that prompted her giving to charity. Just to list briefly some of the charities that she gave to over the years: St Francis Hospice, the Leprosy Mission, Hearing Dogs, Lifeboats, Mission Aviation Fellowship, and of course to the church. And they all benefited from her regular giving. And we were relieved as a family when she discovered that a bank account could easily replace those little pots of money that were scattered around her bungalow. If I talk for a moment about her independence, you'll understand, I think, if you know Ethel, what that means. And in a sense, it was a forced independence. Charles Final, as Andrew said, was a Boxmoor village lad, known to Ethel, and they met on the moor. Charles was always passionate about cricket and kept the pitch for the Boxmoor cricket team. So Ethel knew where to find him. They eventually married in 1957 at the Primitive Methodist Chapel and enjoyed 26 years of happy marriage together. I think it's fair to say that Charles didn't share Ethel's deep faith, but occasionally supported church activities. And Alison remembers Charles, taking Ethel to celebrate each wedding anniversary, attending the Gilbert and Sullivan shows at Dacorum College. When Charles became ill with lung cancer and after a stay in hospital, Ethel cared for him at home until he died in 1983, aged 70. And obviously it was a sad time for the family, but Alison remembers that Mum just appeared to get on with things. And maybe Ethel's single-mindedness and determination stem from that time. And with Alison and I and Andrew and Helen marrying the next year, she was living independently for the next 40 years or so. I've headed this next section, Challenges and Determination. And again, if you know Ethel, you'll know what that means. She taught us, I think, a lot about the hidden disability which is deafness. It's ironic, perhaps, that sometimes we chose not to hear. She realised later in life that her hearing disability was there when she was young and maybe influenced her education and her dislike of school. Ethel was acutely aware of the challenges she faced, and sadly, this also at times affected her social life, though of course Oyster Club was the one place where she felt she could communicate in whatever way she needed to. Ethel Pack always remembers the special way they had of communicating together. And all credit to that group really, perhaps especially to Dorothy Ingham and others whose care was hugely valued. As we think about Ethel's disability, her hearing loss, Rebecca remembers helping Granny keep up with the speed of the hymns. Granny thought this was a really useful thing for Rebecca, or with Rebecca there, but Rebecca admits that she was motivated more by her own embarrassment, that Ethel would always be a few lines behind the hymns and would always sing during the verses. Rebecca again recalls trips in the town with Ethel, with Granny. One particular moment where Granny would think she was whispering something like, "What is that person wearing?" And Rebecca's teenage self being mortified as she said it much louder than she expected. Our communications by fax and text were a lifeline for Ethel, but also for us, I think. And we needed her to say just those few important words, "I'm all right, blue sky." That was enough. To know that she was all right too. And eventually we felt confident about writing a little bit more, rather than those just one-line replies, as Ethel learnt the art of scrolling down on her phone. For a period of time, Ethel attended lip reading classes, and she was able to master this skill to her advantage. But she was always quick to point out to us that we needed to be in good light in order for her to see and read us properly, and not to put any hands over our mouths. Christopher remembers, when it comes to communication, the way in which her facial expression conveyed so much of her emotion, rather than perhaps her words. And I think her sense of humour too, which he felt their relationship was built on. Of course, her mobility due to arthritis was a severe limitation, and her frustration was mainly due to not being able to do the things that she once did. And I think it took a long while for her to get used to other people doing personal care for her. I want to talk about her hobbies and interests, because there were many. In later life, Ethel was able to continue her hobbies and interests, of course. And it was rare for us to arrive at the bungalow or later at Highview Lodge and not find her doing something. Rare for us to arrive and find that she was sleeping. She always said to us, "I'm not going to be like one of those people sitting in the chairs in the television room asleep." And I think she was true to her word, actually. She loved reading. There was always a pile of books. And we brought with us a small pile. You might like to take a few away that she didn't quite get time to read. She knitted, of course, hundreds of squares for blankets for charities. And jigsaw puzzles, she was only able to do 500 pieces. That was all she had room for in front of her on the trolley. Television, she kept up to date with the latest news and was always ready to discuss with us that news. She knew what was happening day by day. She loved old comedies and detective dramas, Father Brown, Agatha Raisin, etc., etc. She loved puzzle books. Maybe most of all we need to mention her love of nature. Rebecca recalls again her Sunday or Saturday morning walks with Granny along the canal. And Ethel would tell Rebecca the history of the fields and the names of the trees and the plants they passed as they walked. Ethel was always surprised, though, that Rebecca had forgotten the names of those trees by the time they did that same walk the next week. And it was a stroke of genius that at the care home, one of the carers was able to fit a bird feeder onto the outside of Ethel's window. And always after that, the robins were regular visitors to the home. As Andrew said, walking was often the only means of getting around, apart from the occasional bus trip and maybe cycling. But Ethel loved walking in the countryside. As a young girl, she would much rather wander around the moor, accompanied by her dogs at various times, searching for wildflowers and creatures, rather than being at school. Ethel loved trips out with my mum and dad, and a much younger Rebecca and Christopher remember Ethel and them and Polly, her then hearing dog, being squashed into the back of my mum and dad's Nissan Micra. Dogs. As a young child, as we said, as an only child, Ethel's dogs were her faithful companions. Judy, Penny, Star, and eventually, of course, her two hearing dogs, Polly and Noodle. Marie remembers Ethel's meal times and Ethel talking to Noodle while she ate. Noodle would sit there patiently, appearing to listen to what was going on, but we know really she was waiting for the scraps that Ethel gave her. Usually peas, I think, were left over, weren't they? Ethel loved gardening, always able to get out when she could, but it became more difficult for her eventually, and Christopher took over, she became his first gardening business customer, as Ethel often reminded him. Marie remembers looking out into the garden, Ethel looking out into the garden through the kitchen window and knowing straight away what was needed to be done in the garden. Just a few thoughts about Ethel's transition to the care home to close with. The move to the care home, Highview Lodge, in 2022 was not an easy transition for Ethel because it represented for her a further loss of that mobility independence that she so much cherished. However, we genuinely think that Ethel was happier there than she had been for a long time during the 15 months or so that she was there. She always preferred to have her door open. That could be something historic because it was the same in the bungalow at night. She preferred to have her door open at night time, didn't she? So perhaps she felt a bit claustrophobic. But we like to think it was because she could see what was happening in the corridor outside her room. But there was also something, I think, very welcoming in that, perhaps. Both Marie and JP felt welcomed into the family as grandchildren by Ethel from the first moment that she met them. And I think Ethel was loved in Highview Lodge, perhaps more than we as a family knew. And it wouldn't be unusual for the carers to drop in for a chat or a sherbet lemon, and in one case to seek advice about a future career. Ethel always kept a copy of the Highview Lodge policy and procedures booklet close by her, and in the early days she wanted to know the significance of the various carers' uniforms so that she could know that she was asking the right person the right question. And I know, and we all know, that Ethel will be missed at Highview Lodge, as she'll be missed by all of us. But we know also we have a lot to thank God for as we remember her life, whether we know her as mum, mum-in-law, auntie, Ethel, or granny, or great-granny, or friend. It was a privilege to do what we could for her. We loved her perhaps more than we told her, and we underestimated what she did for us. But nonetheless, we thank God for her life.
Is there anyone else who would like to say something that we can all hear about Ethel, that reminds us of the kind of person she was, the things she did, what we valued? It's gone all quiet. Would you like to? Come and use the microphone. Thank you. Well, you will, because we think we've got people, we're live streaming, and so the camera is up there, and if you don't use the microphone, they won't hear what you say. So please just stand in front of it. Just stand in front of it.
So I hope it's all right to say, I just wanted to say, I met Ethel when I was a volunteer at Age UK, and I met her as a befriender about 8.5 years ago. And so I used to go nearly every week if I could, firstly to her bungalow and then when she was at Highview. And we used to talk, invariably, like Richard said, she always used to ask me, had I seen the news that lunchtime? And invariably I hadn't. So it was me catching up with what had been in the news and listening to her quite straightforward opinions about what she thought about various governments and members of the royal family and so on. And it used to be a joy to go and see her those mainly Tuesday afternoons. And we used to talk about the weather and the birds. One afternoon we spent half an hour watching the robins at the see-through bird feeder. And we used to talk, when she went to the Oyster Club, we used to talk about what food she'd had and what she'd done that day. We talked about various drama programmes she'd watched. And it's going to just... I wasn't, in the end, I wasn't a befriender. We were friends. I like to think we were friends. And I'll miss her a lot. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What's your name? Sue. Sue. Thank you, Sue. Anyone else? Madeline.
I'm Madeline Freelove, and I started the Oyster Club 19 years ago with a good committee. And Ethel was part of the Oyster Club when we very first began. I remember then she could walk around, and I'm sure she was involved. I can't remember the details. But later on, then she went missing for a while, and then she came back. By that time, she was in the wheelchair with her little dog, Noodle. And we welcomed her back. But as everybody's been saying, she was determined to be involved. Gretchen used to sit next to her a lot of the time and transcribe what was being said so she could understand. And I sat opposite her because another lady used to tried sitting opposite her, frightened her to death over their ways. And I found it very enlightening. But something I do remember very significantly is Ethel was our speaker on one occasion, and her love of nature. She came and told us about the park by up the road, top of Northwich Way, and all the trees, the fact that it was the garden of a big house. And so all the trees were different trees, and she got leaves from them, and she spoke about them. And her love of nature really came through. And we were so pleased to have her there. And we certainly missed her, and Noodle, when she could no longer get there. That's what I wanted to tell you about.
We still have time if there's anyone else that would like to say anything. Helen.
Hello, this is just off the cuff. We all grew up together. We were a family within a family, really. Auntie Dorothy, Auntie Ethel, Mum. And it was a close family. We used to do a lot of things together. Church, picnics, play, because at one point my nan just lived up the road from you guys, and we used to see each other at church, and Dorothy and Uncle Bill lived just round the corner from my nan when they lived in Boxmoor. So we were a close family in a lot of ways, and I just wanted to... We're still close, I think. Thank you.
We're going to sing a hymn, which is in the Methodist hymn book. Some of you will remember the Methodist hymn book. It's the hymn book before last. We think it was also in the Sunday school hymn book. And I certainly remember singing this hymn as a child. And it says so much, really, I think, about the things that Ethel loved. And it's almost like she is saying these words. So we sing, "All things which live below the sky or move within the sea are creatures of the Lord Most High and brothers unto me." We ought to be singing that a bit more often. I know it's not in the hymn book, but we can project the words. Ethel, our other Ethel, is going to read a poem to us.
Leisure. What is this life if, full of care, we have no time to stand and stare? No time to stand beneath the boughs and stare as long as sheep or cows. No time to see, when woods we pass, where squirrels hide their nuts in grass. No time to see, in broad daylight, streams full of stars, light skies at night. No time to turn at beauty's glance and watch her feet, how they can dance. No time to wait till her mouth can enrich that smile her eyes began. A poor life this is, if full of care, we have no time to stand and stare.
Thank you. And Bob is going to read to us from Psalm 121.
Psalm 121, and it's the King James Version. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence forth cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved, that he keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil, and he shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and for evermore. Amen.
Thank you. Ethel often did lift her eyes to the hills and to the valleys and to the fields and to the river. She considered the birds and the wild flowers. She watched her beloved dog, whichever beloved dog it was at the time, and she observed people, all of us. She saw all that went on around her and took it in. But above all, I think she looked to God. And our hymns and our readings, most of which she chose herself for us, tell us so much about what she held dear and how much she rejoiced in some of the small things that we might consider insignificant or not even notice. Each bird that settled on that bird feeder outside her window. Each tiny flower nestling in the grass in danger of being trodden on. Each tree that soared above, that offered nourishment to so many other creatures and shelter. Each butterfly that just settled for an instant on a flower and then fluttered away. Each of these were sources of wonder and delight for her, and reminders of the vast and immeasurable love of our Creator God. She knew herself to be part of a much bigger creation, all made by the hand of God, all known and loved by God, and all called to dwell together in peace. That's the bit we struggle with, isn't it? And in her own unassuming yet very deliberate way, she sought to point all of that out to us, to we who've had the privilege of knowing her and spending time with her over the years. I've always been sad for Ethel that her ears failed her. Knowing that there was no way that she wanted to be cut off from the conversation and miss the punchline of the joke or the nugget of the story. How frustrating it must have been for her. And if we're honest, it was frustrating for us too sometimes when we had to say the same thing several times, and even maybe when we'd finished, weren't quite sure whether she'd got what it was. I'm sure she expressed her frustration about that many times. I didn't actually hear her complain, but I suspect she did, and who could blame her, to be honest? But this I know. She didn't allow her deafness to hold her back, and she didn't use it as an excuse to opt out of anything. And I also know that she used her eyes, and they didn't fail her. They didn't fail her at all. And nor did her faith fail her. So wherever her spiritual home was, in some ways it didn't matter to her. She was willing to find it. She knew it was there, and it could be anywhere. But she would find it, and she would be there. But the thing that Alison told me was that she's found something that Ethel was awarded as a prize, congratulating her. This was at the Primitive Methodist Chapel, congratulating her on her unbroken attendance. This is as a child. Anybody want to guess how long her unbroken attendance was? Do you want to have a go? You're right, it was years. It was 5 years unbroken attendance. My goodness me. Maybe she was made to go, but having said that, she carried on going, didn't she? And she chose to. When it was for her to decide whether that's where she was going to be, that was where she was going to be, always, wherever it was that she worshipped. And I actually remember coming particularly as a preacher when it was born, but on this site. And she was always here whenever I came, always. And there she was with the dog, and despite not being able to hear so much of what was going on, so she couldn't hear the familiar hymns, but she sang them anyway, as we've heard, not always in time and not necessarily at the same key as everybody else. But she sang because she was worshipping God. And she couldn't hear when we read, but she had her Bible and she knew what the reference was, and so she read it. And she knew the scripture passage that was being looked at that week. And I knew, because I had very strict instructions, to bring notes for what I was going to say. I did always preface those by saying, I may not actually say that, but it's what I thought I was going to say when I started. And she would take those notes. And I know she read them. And I remember at some point she said to me, I've kept all of those, you know. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, are they going to be used in evidence against me one day? I've kept those. And she was determined to be here as long as she possibly could. She knew her hymns, she knew her Bible, she knew her faith, she knew her God. Another charity that you haven't mentioned, I happen to know she supported, was what we used to call, what was it? National Children's Home. I know she supported it because she did the area collection, and when she moved to her bungalow, she decided that I was the person to take over. I don't think I had a choice. And so I used to do what she had for many years done, which was trot around Highfield, knocking on people's doors saying, I'm collecting for the National Children's Home. And people would say, oh, you can have this one. Ha, ha, ha. So that was another charity that she supported. When I moved back to Hemel, I'd been away for 13 years. And I had had lots of news of her over the years. And indeed, every Christmas, without fail, she sent me a Christmas card. But I hadn't seen her, and she hadn't seen me. And then she went to hospital, and I thought, I think I'll go and see her. But as I was driving across to Watford, I was thinking, she hasn't seen me for 13 years. Will she know who I am? And then I went onto the ward, and guess what? They'd got COVID. They said, you've got to wear a mask. Well, that doesn't work for lip reading, does it? I had gone with my little notebook and my pen. So I walked into you picture me walking into the ward. There's this mad, scary, white-haired woman. Like that. And she looked at me, and her eyes lit up, and she said, hello, because she knew absolutely exactly who I was. What a wonderful welcome. And I think probably everybody in this church today has had that welcome from Ethel at some point in our lives, probably many times. And indeed, there are people who might be watching online, or people who are no longer with us, who've had that welcome from Ethel. And in that picture that is on the front of our order of service, the thing that I notice is the brightness of her eyes. There's a kind of, I don't know, there's life in her eyes. There's enthusiasm. There's a focus. There's a twinkle in her eye. And somehow her eyes revealed so much to us about who she was. But also, of course, they revealed to her so much about what was going on in the world around her that she might not be able to hear, but she was certainly going to look at if she could. And so Ethel used her eyes to recognize the presence and the power and the peace of God in Scripture, in music, in the written word, but equally in nature and in people, in you and in me. She watched, she noticed, she discerned, and she believed. Ethel was sure about what she saw with her eyes, but she was also sure about what she knew with her heart. And that was a huge amount of love, I think. Maybe we didn't realize so much. Love of life, love of all God's creatures, love of the natural world, and love for people. Her family, all of them. Her friends, all of them. Her church family. And neighbours, and the people who faithfully visited her, and the carers who took care of her. And I'm sure strangers too sometimes who found their way to her door. Ethel was sure of the beauty and the glory and the love of God. She used her eyes and indeed all of her senses to reveal to us what she saw and knew and believed about her loving Heavenly Father, about her Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ, and about the Spirit that inspires and comforts and challenges. Almighty God, who sees, hears, knows and loves each one of us, and who has promised to Ethel and to us, to all who believe, life beyond what we see and know now, even everlasting life. And that final verse from the Psalm strikes me particularly. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. Has Ethel gone out, or has Ethel come in? She might have gone out physically from our lives here and now, but I believe she has come in fully and completely into the presence of Almighty God. Thanks be to God. Amen. So we come to pray. Let us pray. We give thanks for the fruits of the labours of Ethel, for all of the many gifts that she gave to the world, that she gave to this town and this community, that she gave to people far off who she never met but supported with her prayers and her money that she raised, that she gave to us. And loving God, we pray that you will gather her fruit, the work of her hands and her heart, into the harvest of your heavenly kingdom. And we look to you and to one another for comfort in our genuine grief at losing her from amongst us. We pray especially for Alison and Richard, for Andrew and Helen, for Rebecca, JP and Ossian, for Christopher and Marie, for Chloe, Tim, Theo, Barnaby and Felicity, for Samuel and Molly, for Sophia and Nico, for Sarah, and for each who will miss her. Cherish us, soothe us, console us. Teach us to be sure of a future beyond lack of hearing and beyond grief. And as we remember Ethel, whom we love, we remember your love for her, loving God, a love that endures from eternity to eternity. We have entrusted her to your eternal love, committed her to your keeping, and we go to live in hope that we will meet again in your kingdom, where there are no tears, no mourning, no darkness of sorrow. For you are our light and our salvation, and we place all of our trust in you. We bring these and all our prayers in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Just before we sing our closing hymn, I know that all the family want to thank you for coming and want to invite you to stay for refreshments, which will be in the hall upstairs. And if any of you have not donated in memory of Ethel and you would like to, whatever is donated is going to hearing dogs for deaf people, not surprisingly. And there is a plate just by the door. So if you haven't and you want to, then please, if you put something in there, that's where it will go. And please do share with one another your memories of her and why she was special to us. And now I invite you to join in the hymn that she chose for us to sing. And can it be that I should gain an interest in the Saviour's blood? May God, who is present in sunrise and nightfall, and in the crossing of the sea, guide your feet as you go. May God, who is with you when you sit and when you stand, encompass you with love and lead you by the hand. May God, who knows your path and the places where you rest, be with you in your waiting, be your good news for sharing, and lead you in the way that is everlasting. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.